Welcome to AutismSpa.com. I am your host, Shahriar. I'm also the executive director of our sponsor, the Autism Society San Diego. This podcast is designed to help and support parents of autism. So welcome. You can view our previous episodes at AutismSpa.com. If you're interested in being a guest or you think we should cover an important topic, please contact me and we'll be sure to get that guest on our schedule. Today we have Wendy Smith. She's a life planning specialist at Home of Guiding Hands. It's really an amazing organization. She's also going to be a guest speaker in our program on February 7 in San Diego. If you haven't signed up, unfortunately, I think it's sold out, but we may have some virtual registration still available, so you can watch. And through the virtual program, we're able to take questions. So if you have questions and you want to follow up with the speaker, we may be able to help you with that. It's our first time doing it, so we may not do it 100% perfectly, but please bear with us though. Wendy, welcome. It's really great to have you. So excited that you're going to be participating in the program. I think the panel is called, what is it? Autism Parents Can Never Die. That sounds like a joke. Yeah, that sounds like a joke, but it's reality, isn't it?
It is actually how a lot of families feel. Like, I know I'm sick. I know I should go to the doctor. I know I need to take it easy, but all of the things that keep us so busy, and our children often are front and center and first and foremost. And we really do start to feel like I am absolutely indispensable, and there is no choice but to keep living forever because nobody else is able to advocate in the way that I can for my child.
That's such an important point. I mean, I want to obviously get into your background. How did you end up in this role? And then we'll get into what the Home of Guiding Hands is doing for the community. But that one point that parents and caregivers should take care of themselves. That's kind of, I say that, it's so funny. I was just on a call with a family. They just got their kid diagnosed yesterday or recently. They're new. They still got that deer in the headlights look, right? That we're all seeing. My son is 17. We all have a lot of experience with autism, but a lot of new parents don't. And I could see in the mom's eyes that she's beginning to obsess over, am I doing enough? Everything in the life of that parent is now on hold. Now they're obsessing over whether they're doing enough for their child. And my advice to them, having lived this life, is look, take care of yourself first. There's nothing more, there's no pill, there's no therapy more important than a good, stable, loving family environment. There's no, don't think some expert somewhere else or some book you read online or some cure is the way to go. Take care of yourself first. Like they say, we always say that when the oxygen mask comes down on the airplane, put the oxygen on yourself, then on your loved one. And that's really hard to convince parents of. I mean, I feel like we could spend years of training people, and because naturally maternal instincts and parental instincts are such that I need to do everything for my child.
Right.
They give until they have nothing else to give.
Yes.
And then that kid is not in a good position. So I couldn't agree.
I think it's very interesting. Initially, for any parent of a newborn, that you're going to go through the sleep deprivation, and that this person is entirely dependent on you. And then when you get a diagnosis and realize, like, I am a parent of a child with a disability, you're almost back to that newborn status, that everything else has to be on hold, and you start putting yourself in the back burner. And it's not designed to be a lifelong state.
Right.
Infants and newborns rapidly develop abilities, and parents get past that stage pretty rapidly, but it's not sustainable, and absolutely self-care and balance has to be part of the picture for parents.
And thank you for that. And one thing I've also begun to tell parents is we have a dad group that we started here in San Diego. It's called Dadvocates. It's a Dadvocate happy hour. It's the only way I could get dads to come and relax. It's my way of trying to cultivate that culture of taking care of yourself a little bit. Of course, we talk about stuff, our kids, but but it's meant to help dads relax a little bit. But I also talk about in some of the conversation we have is learning to let go a little bit. There's some things we just can't control. I cannot control my kid's life after I'm gone. The best I can do is to make the arrangements and help with whatever I can, and whether it's a family trust or caregiving or home or will, however which way I need to do it. At some point, I need to understand, that I need to let go. And that's a really another tough thing, not only taking care of yourself, but coming to a point, a realization that, you know what, I've done the best I can. The rest is, whether you believe in it, the rest is up to God, to the people around me, to the caregivers, to the home I entrusted my child to. It's up to them. I mean, I need to find some peace.
Yeah.
It's where I think we're going, I hope, as a parent group. But let me get into kind of your background. How did you end up in this role? Was it a family member? How did you?
My path is actually a little bit unusual. I have always been very comfortable with people with disabilities. I started volunteering in junior high and high school. I was like the classroom aid to the teachers in special ed classes before that thing even existed. We're talking like the 1960s, 70s. I was already, just hanging out and felt very comfortable. And it became kind of my part-time job as I went through my teaching career for becoming a credentialed teacher. And because I was so very comfortable, I discovered that I made the lateral move out of education in its traditional form into working with people with disabilities. Those skills translated very nicely. And I started doing residential care. My husband and I were live-in staff in a group home in New Jersey when my oldest son was born. And then I became the parent of a child with a disability. Mm-hmm. So unlike many professionals who have children who became professionals because they wanted to support their child, I was actually a professional before I became a parent. And I do believe that was for a reason and a purpose. And it didn't necessarily make it easier for me to navigate the transition into becoming a parent. There was still a lot of denial on my part. There was a lot of second guessing on my part. I think that is universal to parents with children with special needs. Like, I have to figure this out. Why did this happen? What should I do now? And I do consider myself very fortunate that I had the background that I did so I could be the advocate that my son needed me to be. But we moved to California in 1996, and I came to Home Guiding Hands and became a residential professional with them. And in 2005, we were offered the opportunity to replicate a grant for life planning for parents. And my supervisor came to me and said, you have the teaching background, you have plenty of experience as a professional, and you are a parent. Not only are you a parent, but you're a parent who's had to make some challenging decisions for your child. And I just don't see anybody else that has the skill set to be able to have conversations with other parents who are struggling with some of these ideas. And that's how I moved into my current role as life planning specialist. And it's very astonishing to me that this year will be our 19th year providing life planning programs for people with disabilities in San Diego.
So how do you approach a case? I want to know how you approach if someone came to you and said, I need your help, and then what does the Home of Guiding Hands do collectively? And then what is your role within that organization?
Well, Home of Guiding Hands began as a residential provider. We actually predate Regional Center by a couple of years. We've been around for a very long time. And over the years, we have expanded the services and recognized that it's not just a group home that is needed to support people with disabilities. So we now have a huge range and spectrum of services for different kinds of living options, supporting people with independence in their own homes, providing transportation services, early childhood services, all kinds of different things. We are now an FMS for financial management service for self-determination. We have tailored day services, a lot of different programs, one of which is the life planning workshops that is now my position. And this is done in small groups. I think for many families, it took us about 3 years to convince San Diego's Regional Center to fund the program as a vendor service, because they believed very strongly that their service coordinators are supposed to be helping families with the future planning. And yes, it is part of their job, my experience was that I never really had a close enough relationship with my service coordinator to feel confident discussing my fears and dreams with that individual. And our time together was very truncated. I had maybe an hour a year. That's not a lot of time to think about big issues like my child's future. So the life planning workshops actually create community. Families go through the program together in small groups. So I'm very rarely sitting down with just one parent initially to talk about their individual circumstance. We do it in a group to help normalize the experience, the concerns, the emotions that are involved. And then the life planning program works through different resources, different philosophies. And my goal very much is to help bring what you referenced, some peace of mind to families, to help them get past the kind of crisis response that we often find ourselves in. Certainly in my experience when my son was younger, if I got a phone call from the school, I would immediately go into a panic attack. Like, what happened? Who's hurt? What's going on? Is he getting kicked out? All of the horribilizing things that we start to think about. And it would just be something simple like, we're doing this change and he has to decide if we're going to go into this program or that program, but we need an answer by the end of the day. And I didn't know which was going to be the right choice. I didn't know what was going to be a better fit. So it's kind of, that circumstance of I'm playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and I just make a quick decision. And then I spend the next several months, every time there's any kind of glitch, double checking and second guessing myself. And that never comes to a place of peace. And I think very many families are in that kind of circumstance where I'm just trying to survive the day. I'm trying to make it till bedtime. And if I have to make decisions, I'm just going to make them quickly and I'm going to deal with the fallout from them. But I'm going to wake up and do my best again tomorrow. What we try to accomplish through the life planning, because we are doing it as a community, we have other families to bounce ideas off, to externalize our feelings and emotions with, and feel like I am not the only one who struggles with this. My goal is to help families take those emotions and get past them enough to say pretty clearly, this is what I firmly believe is essential for my child. Whether that is a certain kind of interaction, a certain kind of physical environment, a certain kind of approach, a focus on a specific kind of learning environment, whether it's visual or physical or example-based, whatever the case might be, we know our children very well. We know our children best. And when we have confidence in our knowledge, it helps us use that as the foundation for future decision-making. And that comes with a lot more mental peace and acceptance. And that's my goal, to help families identify through the workshop series for our family. These are our non-negotiables. These are the things that are critical and will always be the first question we ask for any service question, for any living environment, for any program, for any job. These are the things that always have to be factored in. And once you have that foundation, so much of the tension and the stress and the anxiety is released.
Right. Knowledge brings you that peace, just knowing, because I think, as you mentioned, yes, every time my wife calls, it's panic mode. I have no idea what's on the other end of that. I don't know what emergency. We're all, either paramedics or first responders, right? From the minute you get the diagnosis, you stop functioning as a normal adult, and you're constantly either it's crisis or borderline depression or a down, right? It's never quite a zen, peaceful existence because you're so panic stricken. And it sounds like what you help families do is to obviously get over that and plan for all the different things you just mentioned and living. By the way, I want to talk about housing and residential, because I can see from a lot of surveys that we do, and it's very, very important to our community. Housing and where will my kid live is probably one of the biggest concerns, apart from the loving environment and obviously the social interaction and recreation and meaningful life that you want for our kids. Physically, where would they live? How are they going to be managed, especially the high support needs like my son and perhaps others? So it's good to know that they come to you kind of a mess and they kind of leave in a little bit of a better mental state, which is fantastic. But in the 5 minutes we have more, I do want to talk a little bit more about the residential or living situation. How do you find families? How do you help families with that process?
Well, a huge part of it is helping them figure out what do they envision as possibility. It's hard to help them find an actual option if they're not sure what they are in favor of. So many families are initially thinking like they're just going to stay at home. Right. And sometimes that's not what their child wants. They've watched all their brothers and sisters go on to their own adult lives. And they're like, when is it my turn to leave the house? Mm-hmm. Even if that's not the case, sometimes it's just not safe for an individual to continue with their family. There are growing numbers of different options available, and we continue to see legislation that changes what is and is not available. The old institutions, the state developmental centers, have been discontinued and are no longer really an option, except in the most extreme situations. But there are new residential options that do provide enhanced staffing supports to approximate the kind of safety requirements that are needed for people that maybe have very, very challenging and sometimes unsafe dynamics. I think I may not have mentioned, I did mention I am a parent of a child with a disability. My son is 32, and similar to your son, he falls into that more extreme need category. So his living environment is based in pretty strongly on his safety. But there are never enough placements. That's something that we see over and over again. Whether someone is looking for their own apartment, affordable housing for people with disabilities is a huge concern, and it's something that continues to come up in the voting cycles, enhancing opportunities and options for low-income housing. And that absolutely applies to people with disabilities who are trying to have their own independence, as well as licensed facilities. The guidelines are moving away from the larger developmental center kind of institutions to much smaller group homes. So you might have a few agencies that still have campus-based with larger populations, but we're seeing very much that they are more community-based and smaller dynamics, generally no more than 6 individuals living together. And for new licensed facilities, new providers are not allowed to have more than 4 individuals living together. The newest living option that's available is similar to foster care for adults with developmental disabilities. And those are designed to have no more than 2 individuals living in the home, and each of them must have their own bedroom. So the programs and the guidelines and the wishes of the population are very much for my own space with my own personality and the option to be independent, or to be as independent as possible with the right kinds of supports. That just means that there are more and more opportunities without necessarily the volume that we know is necessary. So there are growing opportunities. So parents can generally hear about and find something that feels like a good fit for their values, for their child, for the needs of support. But they might find out that there are so few providers or so few openings that it might be 5 or 6 years before there's going to be an open bed.
Right.
So families really need to be thinking well in advance and have conversations well in advance, and recognize that when I'm ready, there may not be something right away. So I might be ready for 3 years before I find something. Or I could think like, it's going to be 3 years before they find me anything, so I'll go ahead and open the door. And surprise, 3 months later, here we are, and we found it. And maybe I wasn't as ready as I thought I was emotionally. Those are all dynamics that we see. But the volume of opportunities is really where we continue to struggle.
No, that's 100% true. I mean, even physically, if there are beds, they're not in the geographic area where people can feel connected to their loved one. They're far away, they cannot visit them every day. So it's a dramatic life change. And I've spoken with parents and, some moms that are just guilt-ridden, that they had to make that terrible, difficult choice for the safety of their loved ones in the family and for the well-being of their child, that they have to put them in a home. Often they're not close by to the family home. It's not everyone that can maybe live next door to, buy a condo next door, buy a home next door. How many people can do that? So it's out of state often. and it just creates a bit of a challenge. But I find some of the parents that have adjusted to that kind of look at themselves and tell me, my son's happier that way. Like, he's happy.
Yes.
You know, the child is happy. So it doesn't matter what your external feelings of guilt and all the baggage that we bring to a situation as parents and loved ones. When you look at that individual, that person loves their routine. They love their books. They love their room. They love their interaction. They're fine. So that letting go part is what I was kind of started speaking about earlier. Yeah. It's tough to learn to let go. And understand that your kid could be fine without you. Is that something you're ready to accept?
That's one of the biggest things that parents really discover through the life planning workshop is just how much their own emotions and what they are projecting into the situation have impacted everything about what they feel is possible and what they are hoping would happen and the results. It's one of the things I say very frequently. Your emotions are natural, they're acceptable, they are valid, but they cannot become the disruptor or the barrier that keeps you from making the decision that you know intellectually is in your child's best interest just because it's going to hurt your heart.
Right.
As a parent, we know our hearts are going to hurt.
Always. And it's always a problem. We need to be more Spock-like. A little emotions, misguide us. Wendy Smith, this has been fantastic. We could speak for hours learning about what you do. So such important work, just helping families with these transitions, life-altering, life-changing, but life betterment in so many ways. So I'm so glad you're participating in our February 7th conference. We will see you there. And if you haven't signed up, there's still some virtual appointments, I think, available, I hope. But it's a great forum, and we're so honored to have a guest like Wendy in attendance. Thank you so much for joining me, Wendy.
Thank you.